super secret guest pick of the week.
Oh, yeah? Well, I got plenty of secret stuff, too. I've got my secret socks on.
All right, well, welcome to the show, Matthew Betz, the lead writer and injury expert for the Fantasy Footballers, as well as host of the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast. Thanks for being with us, Betz.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I'm really excited to be on here, and I think this is the first time I've ever been on a show where there has been a SpongeBob drop. So kudos to you guys for that. That's literally the first time ever. So that was awesome.
It's not our only SpongeBob drop, if I'm being honest. True. And
perfect.
And no, actually, this is so much by surprise to have someone who is anyone on our show that that drop was not intended for something like this. It was just the voiceover that I had from having other people in our league on to call picks for the week's game. So I had to make do with what I had.
There you go.
Stuff. But I know we've kept this as a surprise to the rest of our league and our wide variety of viewers. Betz, why don't I throw it to you real quick and just, what makes you decide to accept an invite to a show like this?
That's very true. That's crazy.
I am a football fiend, and when I say fiend, I mean a true addict, a true degen who honestly just loves talking about anything football related, whether it's Dynasty, whether it's DFS, whether it's betting, prop betting, any and all of that kind of stuff is definitely right up my alley. So anytime someone asks me to come on, I truly appreciate it, and it feels like an honor. Like I'm just a regular dude like you guys, and people are like, hey man, you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes to hop on the show. Yes, I will make time for it. So I'm super excited to talk football with you guys tonight.
Yeah, and like I said, we couldn't have been more excited. Nick can attest. When I sent you that DM on Twitter, I had no expectation. I actually sat there and was like, man, am I insulting him for asking him to come on a show that gets like 30
the
views?
Radishcast.
Yeah, how rude of you.
So but then I jumped on a phone call with Nick probably 2 minutes after you said let's do it, and we got right into it. But
sweet.
Let's jump right in and let's talk some football. So you are a PT by day, injury expert, as the footballers would call you. So let's talk injuries first and foremost. I really want to get your take. We hear the term injury prone thrown around every year. Everybody wants to call a player injury prone. If you look at a couple of years ago, Dalvin Cook was seen as this big injury prone guy, and then he goes one season without getting hurt, and suddenly that tag goes away. So when you're looking at players, how do you really evaluate what is injury prone and what's maybe just a couple of unlucky situations?
Yeah, it's sort of a delicate balance of kind of understanding a player's injury history and then sort of understanding like what is their environment or kind of what is the ecosystem that they're living in right now. And for every player in football, it is a recipe for injury. So I want to give a shout out to my good buddy, Edwin Porras. He's also a PT, works for Fantasy Points. He has done research showing that there are less than 2% of games in the NFL that are injury free. So you're basically asking players to come out into a sport that injuries just happen. That's just what happens in football, right? Like it's one of the highest injury rates in the entire sports world. So in and of itself, all of these players are stacked up against the cards in terms of staying healthy. We also know, kind of looking at like injury rates in different positions, running backs just get hurt more than other players. So just because I'm trying to think of a good example, just because, Dalvin Cook, like you said, had a couple bad runs of injury doesn't necessarily mean that he is injury prone. The position in general is more likely to sustain injury. There's a lot of research out there that supports that. So those are kind of two underlying factors just to understand in terms of football in general. But then looking at more specifically, I do not believe in the term injury prone necessarily. And the reason that I say that is because what you're implying with that term that you'll hear out there is basically that like this player just has something inherently in their DNA that is predisposing them to injury. And there are super rare cases where that does exist, but we don't actually know from a medical level, like, is that for this player or that player A or player B? We don't really know. And it's super rare as is. So the fact that we're even like trying to project that onto a roster of 32 NFL teams is fool's gold. You'll never figure it out. So I almost kind of throw it off as like, it's not really even a thing. But there are players who have a certain injury that are more prone to having the same injury in the future. And that's sort of what I think people generally mean when they say injury prone. For example, Will Fuller and the hamstrings, right? Like we know what goes on there. We know that that is a higher injury rate. He always has multiple in his injury history. So yes, he is a player who's more prone to a future hamstring injury than someone else who has never had one in their entire life. That is absolutely 100% correct. But for me, when I feel like I hear the term injury prone, it's often misused to kind of describe a player who has had a lot of bad luck. Thinking about, Keenan Allen from like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, Keenan Allen basically got me a job with the Ballers, just being like, this guy is not injury prone. People were really worried because he had the fractured collarbone, he had the knee injury, he had lacerated kidney, I think it was, or a spleen, and all of a sudden everyone started freaking out. And what I look for when I look to try to predict, how risky is this player in terms of injury, it's really the recurring theme, right? The guy who has several ankle sprains, the guy who has 6 hamstring strains in his history, Jordan Reed with the concussions, like those kind of things. Yeah, you could say that player is more prone to a certain injury, but I think the term in general is sort of a misnomer.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I follow you on Twitter, and I saw you actually did a write-up about George Kittle and how a lot of his injuries came as a blocker, as a defenseless receiver. They weren't something that it was more unlucky than injury prone, and that's really where that kind of dug this question out of. I guess one player, just to pick one out of the crowd, Raheem Mostert is one that sticks out, as a guy who's starting to get older and has had a couple of those ankle injuries last year that are looking to slow him down. Is that one player that you think might fall into that category?
Yeah, definitely. He's in the ultimate draft kit. I read up the injury report section every year. He's in there as a player who I'm kind of concerned about. Like, missed a couple of games last year with a sprained MCL, then also had a high ankle sprain on top of that. And he's a guy who really hasn't ever played 16 games in his career. Now, for the running back we talked about, it's not common anyway to do that. So that's sort of stacked up against him and any other running back, really. But looking at kind of his injury history, like you said, multiple ankle issues is kind of what I'm looking at. He's 29 years old, missed 5+ games in every season except for one in his pro career, has never proven he can actually carry the rock, as a full-time running back. Like, there's a lot of research out there and a lot of, things stacked up against his bet to play 14, 15, 16 games, or 17, I guess, this year, really. And so we know that he carries a higher, re-injury risk entering this year than some of the other running backs on that roster. So yes, I think Raheem Mostert definitely fits the bill of a guy that I'm probably staying away from. Even in Dynasty, if I'm a contender, I'm looking to get out from Raheem if possible at this point in his career.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
I actually have a question too for about usage too. Is that an impact on your decision-making process? Like Barkley versus Kamara, I know some carries were taken away last year from Kamara. So I don't know, does that play into it as well, your usage?
As far as like risk of injury, if a certain player carries the ball or touches the ball a certain amount of time?
Yeah, increased volume.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy. You would think that, the obvious answer is like, oh, this player touches the ball more, they're going to get tackled more, they're going to be more at risk for injury. But the data doesn't actually show that, which is shocking.
Okay.
A lot of the data is actually looking at players coming out of college going to the NFL and seeing, did this player who had X number of carries, I can't remember what the threshold they used was, but basically did they exceed that or not? And did their injury risk increase when they had more than whatever they just chose as their cutoff? And the answer was no, they were basically the same. So even though players are, entering the NFL too with like huge workloads, people were always concerned about, we heard it last year with Jonathan Taylor. It was like, well, he's had a ton of work on his legs. Can he hold up in the NFL? I mean, we're lucky to get these running backs for 3 years. So like, it doesn't matter what they did in college, right? Like it's a misnomer out there. And actually the data shows that it doesn't actually correlate.
That's really interesting. So that'll bring us to the next point. Are you about targeting players later in the draft that you think would slip because of this? Do you have any suggestions on that? I mean, you can go both. We're just talking about rookies though right now. So
yeah, a guy that I was really excited about entering the pre-draft process was Terrace Marshall out of LSU. He is a guy who quietly was awesome in that LSU offense, but everyone always talked about, right, Joe Burrow and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and of course Jamar Chase, et cetera, et cetera. He kind of seems to be the forgotten guy. And it's all because right before the NFL draft, there were teams that were maybe concerned about his injury history. And to me, it seems a little overblown. He's a guy who's missed time because of recurring foot issues, but they're on opposite sides. So he had an injury in high school that he ended up having a fracture with a dislocation of his ankle. had to kind of redshirt his rookie year or his freshman year really at LSU. Came back, had a stress fracture on the other side a couple years later. So outside of those two things, like that's it in his injury history. I don't know if it was something else that maybe the teams didn't see, like they didn't have enough confidence talking to like prior coaches, or I don't know what it was, but based off just those two things, it's not really that concerning to me anyway. So he's a guy that I've been scooping up later in like the late second of especially Superflex leagues, getting him kind of mid to early second in single quarterback leagues. He's a guy who I would have taken in the first round, even before this news, and still with this news that I would still take him there. So yeah, he's a guy that I think is a huge value right now in rookie drafts that I love his prospect profile, his production that he had at LSU, and I like the landing spot too.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I guess looking at the bigger picture outside of even rookies, I'm going to throw out a couple names here and we'll play a little bit of I'm not going to say play a game because I know you get flashbacks from Borg when anybody talks about playing a game. But
it makes me look like an idiot on the show every time.
But I'm gonna throw out a couple of names, and I just want you to either say, fade if it's someone that their injury is causing a dip for you versus their ADP, and even if it's not, a several round thing, if it's just like, man, this guy's usually a mid first guy, I wouldn't touch him until late first. So I just want you to either say fade or I don't know what other word do we want to use, Nick? Fade or scoop? How about that?
Scoop. I like scoop. We could use that earlier. Yeah. Scoop them up.
I'm gonna throw out a couple players who were injured last year at their current ADP. Would you fade them or would you scoop them? So let's go with Saquon Barkley.
Oh, this is terrifying to say, but I'm gonna fade him at his ADP because of where he's going.
Christian McCaffrey.
Scoop.
Easy.
Joe Burrow.
This is gonna be a horrible answer. I'm sort of in between, and I feel like I have to explain on that.
All right, we'll let you explain on this one.
Okay, so he's going as a quarterback 9 and underdog right now, which I do not love. I think that's a little early for a player who everyone is just assuming like is going to be totally fine this year. And I do think I think he returns the form and he's totally fine late in the year. But when you're drafting him at quarterback 9, like you're almost already at ceiling for Joe Burrow, in my opinion, coming off of this significant knee injury, where in order to get to the top, 5 at the quarterback position, you have to run the football. Like in today's NFL, it's either Pat Mahomes or Russian quarterbacks that get there. And if he's not going to, run like these other guys are, like Lamar, Josh Allen, etc., and he's not going to throw the ball like Mahomes, where is there room for growth with him? So that's kind of where I'm like, I think his ADP's okay, and I think he'll return to form, but I'm not really investing at the ADP, if that makes sense. I just like to find guys that are able to kind of exceed at their ADP. In Dynasty, still love him. Still absolutely love him. And then in redraft leagues, I think he's going more like quarterback 12 or so. So I think that at that price, I will scoop. At like QB9 best ball, I will fade.
All right, I got 2 more. Dak Prescott.
Scoop. Big time.
Big time scoop.
Very excited about that.
And the last one is going to be Cortland Sutton.
Oh, I like that as well. Scoop.
All right. So no, I like those. All right, switching back to rookies. This is where you get to just blow up our league. So, like I said, like I told you when I first asked you to be on the podcast, we are very much, centered around our dynasty league. And so whoever you name here is going to probably jump about a full round in ADP. So I want to ask you, who is your top rookie sleeper? So I'm talking someone 3rd, 4th round, 5th round of rookie drafts. We're single quarterback. I don't think once you get to that point, it really matters. They're all really the same versus super flex. But who's someone that you'd always want to target that late in a rookie draft?
Yeah, this is always like I feel like the key question come rookie season. And I just want to preface this for all of your league mates. Regardless of whoever comes on the show or any of your friends that you ask, the answer is 99.9% wrong. So please do not hold me to this, because we know in the 4th and 5th round, they're just a bunch of dudes that you hope even make the team at this point.
Yeah.
However, with that being said, this is kind of a little higher than maybe what you suggested, but like late 3rd or even like middle 3rd. Sometimes I've seen him in the 4th. I still like Tylan Wallace quite a bit.
Okay.
He is a guy who I haven't been able to quit. And it's mostly because his production profile is actually really, really strong. He did have the ACL, which a lot of people were kind of concerned about, but he showed last year, coming off the injury, that he was able to succeed and perform. And now he's entering the NFL, 2 years out from injury, which we know that the performance increases the further you get out from injury. So I love Tylan Wallace. I liked his tape a lot. A guy that can really high point the football, go up and get it kind of player. The only thing that's really tricky with him is that you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to literally put him on your taxi squad or your bench and just kind of sit there and hope that he gets a shot, because it's the Ravens. They ranked 32nd in pass rate 2 years in a row. The depth chart in front of him, yes, it has Marquise Brown. They obviously took the first rounder there with Rashad Bateman. So like it's stacked up against him. Don't get me wrong, but he's just a guy that I want to bet on his talent, and maybe he kind of has this like late development in his career. But gosh, if he would have gone anywhere else, I would have been much more excited.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. You hear a lot of talk about Rashad Bateman, falling out of the graces based on his landing spot. He was being talked about as the second, third prospect by a lot of people coming out of this class for the wide receiver position. But yeah, Tylan Wallace is definitely one that if he would have landed on a Chargers offense or somewhere else where maybe there was a few more targets available, he would have really jumped up.
Yep, definitely.
So I got a question that could not be more fitting. And I wrote this question, and then I saw you retweeted something that caught my eye, and it was based on how camp reports are all over the place. And so we're in the middle of the season of off-season OTAs and just nonstop. Oh, this guy is going to be a starter now, and now this guy looks like a wide receiver one, and you see all sorts of things. So I really want to get your feel on how you separate noise from news, and really, there's two sides of this. Last year you could have been on the early side of picking up James Robinson based on a couple of camp reports that changed your whole season, but you could also have gotten the other side of it and went out and acquired Le'Veon Bell because Adam Gase says he looked good and motivated, and then that we all see how that worked out. So how do you really approach seeing all of these different reports coming out?
Yeah, like you said, it is a lot of noise right now, and there's maybe 2% of it's actually news that's actionable. So I try not to read a lot of news often, to be honest with you. Like, you could get lost every day if you go on I can't say NBC Sports Edge. If you go on Roto World, you can get lost there just looking at every report from every day. Or if you're on Twitter, you see people hyping up certain players all the time. But for me, I follow what the team actually does. I don't care about what they say at all. Like they're there to talk about their guys. They're not going to say anything bad about their players. So I'm more looking at what does playing time look like in the preseason? What does the video clips show when you're looking for players coming off of injury, that kind of stuff? Like, how well are they moving? That's what I look for. And I really try to find a beat reporter for every team that I trust a lot, because there's 30 to 50 for every single team. So again, it's easy to get lost in the weeds, especially on Twitter. But I think finding, your 32, the ones that you truly trust, and being able to, if you're a sicko like me, put on notifications on your phone or follow most of their tweets, then that's the way to do it, in my opinion. I have a list. If your friends or anyone's interested, let me know. I'm happy to share it. Of the ones that I follow. But yes, that is the way that I go about it, because like I said, there's just so much this time of year, and all of it's positive.
Yeah, don't share that list with those guys. We'll just take it though.
Perfect. You can edit this part out.
Yeah, right. All right. The next portion of it is, how do you value future draft picks like 2022, 2023? Right now, this is, in our league, we actually saw a lot of future picks being thrown around, especially after the first round, not knowing how people are going to finish. How do you value them going?
Yeah, so I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. I'm not a huge Devy guy. There's some resources that I trust. Shout out to my guy, Ray Garvin. He's awesome. He knows this stuff. I trust his opinion about college football way more than mine. So it's kind of one of those things that if someone is really hyped about future draft classes and they're willing to sort of plant their flag on a draft class, I'm willing to sell you my rookie pick because I don't even know if this league is going to be around in 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like people just think that they can predict what the future is going to look like. And then you have guys who go back to school or guys who get an injury or who knows what. Like I will definitely trade you my first in 3 or 4 years. Also knowing that like, you know, you can eventually over time recoup that if you really want to get it back via trade and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like people are trying to just get ahead of themselves almost too much with those rookie picks. And for me, I'm willing to take the player that I know is going to be on an NFL field for the next 2 years rather than wait it out and just be like, oh, look at this team that's going to be sick in 4 years, you know, because who knows? It may never happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a situation, not going to name any names, but a guy who really pushed his window out. He traded away Hopkins and Ridley and Chubb all last year on an average. You know, he was a contending team, but he wanted picks and he wanted rookies and you know, you saw
what his whole team is really. It's all just hope right now. You're looking at John. Oh, John, sorry.
Yeah, that's rough, man. I would not have done that.
No, I don't know why he did.
So the one last question I want to get into, and then we'll let you go. I'm sure you got other things to do tonight, but you know, one thing as we were creating this league, we were looking for how we can make it more fun. And one of the least fun parts about fantasy football, in my mind at least, is when someone else makes a trade and it's a big blockbuster trade and you look at it and you say, oh man, if I would have known that guy was on the block, I would have offered way more, or I would offer this or that or the other thing. So we actually implemented our counter offer rule, and this works well just because we're a group of college buddies. We all know each other well. We communicate really well. So basically, whenever a trade happens in our league, it goes live to the rest of the league for 24 hours. And during that time, anybody can send any counter offer to either person as long as it includes at least one of the pieces. And then if they accept a counter offer, 4 more hours gets tacked on to give other people time. We've had double, triple counters, and it's a lot of fun. You know, I've been on the wrong end of a couple, you know, trades getting stole out from under me, but it's still a lot of fun. And so I'm really curious. Have you dealt with any leagues or dealt with any, you know, heard about any just creative, interesting rules that you thought maybe made the game more fun, or maybe even some bad ones that really you think took away from the game?
That is an insane rule, and that gives me stress just thinking about it. Like just refreshing your inbox to see like did another trade go through or something, or like a group chat. Yeah, that makes me stressed. You guys are sickos. I like rules that sort of help to make the league, like give you more skin in the game, even for like rebuilding teams. So my college buddies and I have a dynasty league that we've had for, God, I don't even know at this point, 6-7 years, something like that. And for us, there's obviously a punishment for whoever comes in dead last. So if you want to tank, go ahead, but you know that you're gonna have to do an embarrassing punishment. But I like the sort of leagues and rules that kind of have skin in the game. So we often have trades that go down in the league, and then people can kind of vote or like place a bet like, hey, I bet, you know, owner A or owner B, their team is going to come out on the top of this trade in a year. Or let's say they traded, I don't even know, Chase Claypool, and you say, I don't think he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver. Someone else in your league says, that's a great trade, he's going to be top 24 or top 15, wherever you set the line. We'll like actually wager on the trades that happen. So that like you're invested in every single trade that goes down, and you don't have to wager on it. You can pass, but you're invested in seeing what the league is doing to make it very, very interactive, even if you're not the one actually trading. So I think it's a good way to get, you know, 12 or in our case 14 people involved to really kind of be all in on the league, which is fun. Yeah,
that's actually, you know, we might be stealing that one, because we have we have a member of the league that runs his own little mini sports book for the league, where we can bet on individual matchups. So, you know, if I play Nick one week, he sets an over under, and we get to actually bet on just that game and things like that. So so I have a feeling Tony might be taking a note or two.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Nick, any final thoughts?
No, not much. I just want to thank you for coming on. That was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I appreciate you having me. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, thank you. And everybody can find Matthew at the Fantasy PT on Twitter if you want to give him a follow there. Otherwise, go ahead and give the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast a listen, and maybe even buy the UDK, which I know Matthew did a lot of work for. So I'm sorry I called you Matthew a couple times. I know that you're more of a Betz guy, but
totally fine. My mom would be very proud right now.
All right. Well, Betz, we appreciate you coming on. Have a great night.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Max.